Another thing that Orgeron mentioned yesterday was he confirmed the report from Jordy and T-Bop on Off the Bench about Bennie Logan joining LSU staff as a defensive analyst.
Major hire for the LSU Tigers. One of the all-time greats coming back. Bennie, I lean on Bennie on technique. I mean, he knows it well. He knows all Pete's stuff. And, man, we're in the meetings, me and him talking about it. It's like having a full-time coach with us. And, he can be a good mentor to these young men. And that's what he came back for. I talked to him. I said, you know what? Because he's such a great character, young guy, wore number 18. He has so much to give. And he just wants to give back.
So Bennie Logan joins LSU staff as a defensive analyst. It is worth noting there specifically with Bennie, and Ed mentioned it. Bennie was at LSU, and post, I can tell you this, I know for a fact, Bennie prepared for the combine and the draft at Traction when Pete Jenkins was doing the combine prep over at Traction. So Pete knows Bennie very well, and Bennie has learned under Pete Jenkins. And, of course, we all know Ed Orgeron's lineage and relationship with Pete Jenkins. So anyone who speaks that language and that technique and that terminology, like that's going to fall in line well with how Ed teaches that position. So that part of it is a major check mark for Bennie Logan. But if you're following this offseason, we've seen Kevin Faulk move from an off-field role to the running backs coach, replacing Tommy Robinson. We've seen Kelvin Sheppard come on board as director of player development. Now, Bennie Logan's on as a defensive analyst, and we also know that Eddie Kennison is joining the staff as well. And I was asked yesterday by somebody on Twitter, and again, this is one small sample of a person on Twitter, but if what I've learned in doing this long enough is that none of us we don't live in a vacuum. None of us lives on an island. If one person's thinking something, there are other people who are thinking it as well. And someone asked if there was any concern about Ed only hiring former LSU players. And I understand the basis of that question because, right or wrong, part of the criticism that Paul Mainieri has gotten on the baseball side is that he only hires his former players as assistants. I think these are complete polar opposite questions. And I'll elaborate. But first, here was Ed Orgeron talking about bringing former players back into the program.
Once you're a Tiger for life. And these guys, they bled the purple and gold, so they understand. I think they're invested. They want to represent LSU. The guys that come back and want to work are very motivated. They understand this place. They understand me. They understand the state of Louisiana. They understand the expectations, and they invite them.
So a couple of things. If Ed Orgeron were only hiring former players for on-field jobs, that would be a question. If he were and not that because they're former players, but if he were hiring unqualified coaches for his on-field jobs, that would be a bigger red flag. Because you only have 10 on-field assistants. You can only have 10 full-time on-field assistants. So those guys have to do so much. From coaching position groups and recruiting, and you have to fill so many different roles on a staff with just those 10 guys. So you've got to maximize every position on your staff, every full-time position on your staff. Now, if you work at a place where you have the resources to invest in support staff, awesome. I've said this a million times. If there's an analyst or someone in an off-field role that makes you 0.5% better, and you work for an athletic department that's willing to foot the bill for that salary, awesome. Difference between the haves and the have-nots, LSU is a have in college football and in college athletics. Phenomenal. So that's number one. You're not hiring them for on-field. You're hiring these guys as on-field coaches. And the guys that are, like Steve Ensminger, that are LSU alums, Steve Ensminger, Corey Raymond, Kevin Faulk, they are intensely qualified. The on-field positions that LSU has replaced this year, Scott Linehan's a former NFL head coach. Bo Pelini's been a defensive coordinator and a head coach in major college football. Like, that's not like defaulting to guys who played for you. I have no problem giving guys that have come through this program their foot in the door opportunity for many of the reasons Ed just said there. Not only are you not having to use one of your 10 permanent on-field coaching spots, But also think about guys like Kelvin Sheppard, like Bennie Logan, like Eddie Kennison, who's coming on staff now as well, like what the role Kevin Faulk was in before he's now moving to a full-time role. What do all of those guys have in common that the current players want? NFL experience. Every kid on LSU's team, if you're a 4- or 5-star guy, if you sign a scholarship at LSU, you have the ambition of being an NFL player. Not all of them are going to make it, but if you sign out of high school as a 4- or 5-star guy at LSU, you are eyeing the NFL one day. Well, now you got a bunch of guys that are young enough to be relatable to the current student athlete. I mean, Bennie Logan just finished his playing career 8 years ago. I mean, Kelvin Sheppard played in that Cotton Bowl in 2010 when LSU beat Texas A&M. Here you are 10 years later, and now he's on staff after playing in the league for 10 years. That's phenomenal. Like, you've got guys that are young enough to relate to these current players that also have NFL experience, have what they want. What a great asset. Moreover, they bleed purple and gold. Like, these are guys that played at LSU, that love the university, that love the program, that want to come and give back and be engaged and involved. There is no downside to this. And then beyond that, also, you're talking about connecting different eras and generations of LSU football. One of the best things Ed Orgeron did when he got the interim job, one of the best, was he immediately opened the door to former players. The Tiger Walk that they do before games, every former LSU player was invited. Practice, any former LSU player can go out to practice at any time they want to go watch. He connected the different eras of LSU football, many of whom, especially those in the 90s, had felt like they had been forgotten. So, man, I love that they're doing this. I love that they're bringing former Tigers back into the program. You look at programs, not in any sport, or even in professional sports, where there seems to be tremendous pride throughout the program and the fan base. And you go, man, how did they get that? Well, it's like this. You have people around that deeply care. They're not using a job as a stepping stone. They deeply care and want to instill that into the next generation of players. And I think having former players involved is a gigantic benefit. So, man, I know some people have asked that question about, what's the deal with just bringing all the former players back? I love it. It would be different if you were hiring unqualified guys for your full-time on-field jobs. That's not happening. You're supplementing your entire program by bringing in people that are qualified, that have great experience, that are relatable, that love LSU. I don't see the downside of that. I think it's awesome. I think it's phenomenal having all these guys back within the program.